it's just, yeah, you keep using this phrase WMD, and I'm thinking like, oh, a country that has WMD and we're hesitant to use military force. Well, that's kind of ironic in light of the Iraq War anniversary.
Well, don't forget, yeah, it's a good point, and of course, I'm sure the interesting thing is that most of us would say that going after countries WMD probably is a good thing, and yet here we have a situation in which a lot of people are saying it's a bad thing. So it's interesting how the tables sort of turned a little bit on this one.
Well, I mean, Michael, let's game this out a little bit, because to my mind, this is kind of a consistent part of the Obama strategy, right? Which is, or at least this aspect of the Obama foreign policy strategy, which is leading from behind, right? Mm-hmm. Don't get involved until it looks like it's really near the tipping point, or the consequences of not getting involved would harm vital United States interests. And it seems to me, well, you look at it historically, when we do sort of get involved just because something flares up, or there's some kind of a brutal dictator that is in charge, there tends to be mission creep. We tend to kill more people by going in, or not necessarily help the situation. And for a long time, it seemed like a lot of national foreign policy experts were saying that getting involved in Syria would be not that much different than what happened with Iraq, in that this is a civil war that's underway. I mean, in the case of Iraq, we obviously unleashed that civil war. I mean, what would be the negative consequences of going in there? I mean, certainly it seems like it's something they could get a multilateral international agreement mandate to do, or relatively easily.
Well, no, they can't. I mean, that's exactly part of the problem. They can't get an international multilateral agreement because, the UN Security Council will never agree to that, because the Russians and Chinese will never go along with it, especially after what happened in Libya. So if you do get involved in Syria, you're doing it outside the UN system, which is a problematic position to take. And I think in general, I mean, look, we don't know Syria. How are we going to play this out? We're going to send troops in, and we're going to get involved in a war with the Assad government, and then what are we going to do? We're going to stick around and be responsible for reconstruction of Syria, and are we going to then decide who gets to run the country? Is it going to be the Al Qaeda groups, the Islamist groups who appear to be the strongest among the rebels? It's getting involved is not so simple to do, and I'm not so sure where the end game is. And I think that's the concern. I think, for people who don't want to see us get militarily involved in Syria. And I think for what it's worth, I mean, this is kind of a tradition in American foreign policy. We don't usually get involved in these fights. I know that Iraq is very resonant in people's minds, but we have generally eschewed involvement in these sort of humanitarian emergencies, whether it was in the Balkans in the 90s or in Rwanda in the 90s as well. There are exceptions, obviously, places like Kosovo and obviously in Libya. But there are exceptions where we had broad international support. Geographically, it was sort of easier to do. The enemy was a little less tenacious potentially than you were dealing with in those two places. So I just think I think the consequences of use of force are ones that probably are what's holding back policymakers, and I don't think that's illegitimate. I mean, I think there is real concern about what we could accomplish, and then what happens afterwards. I mean, do we end up owning Syria afterwards? And if you don't, by the way, have UN support, then you're kind of acting illegally under international law. It's not something that we want to do. We did it in Kosovo in the 90s. I'm not sure they want to do it. We want to do it now, and I don't know, by the way, whether there's strong support among NATO members or even in the region to see the U.S. or any other country get involved militarily.